I'm not fully convinced of the execution of this installment into the New Vegas story, but I don't think it's completely flawed either. Some fans praised its tone and philosophical underpinnings, while others like me suffered the constant preaching of Ulysses monologues. But if history repeats itself, we know that it serves more than just being a simple standalone DLC. Instead, this functions as a conclusion to a long-running series of stories, a finality to the through line tracked across the entirety of the DLCs, and a background narrative that had repercussions which reverberated throughout the Mojave. So, despite the common critiques, there's more to be found within the rubble than just debris and death. But to find what we seek, we have to walk the Lonesome Road. Our first steps on the Lonesome Road have us all struck by devastation. The winds howling and crumpled bricks have a history to be revealed. As we make our descent via missile silo, it's hard to not feel the irony as these beginnings echo the end. To this effect, we meet a familiar face, Edie, a survivor of the relics of old, by which we've been dismantling, unknowingly having already failed their task, as they mean to defend the bunker from those intent on accessing what's here. Upon exiting, we're greeted by Ulysses for the first time as he monologues through Edie. He remains at a safe distance to prevent us from shutting him up ourselves. We're bombarded with long dialogues about a great number of things, which we'll get to.
You may not know my voice. I walked a career, spent too many years in the history of you had lives and everything you are coming like you.
For now, we must continue surviving against the harshities before us, scattered across the devastation. The main contentious force is that of the marked men, enemies that are a bit worse for wear. Their skin, armor, and tools appearing more brutish. They give a more disheveled impression, rather than the more structured and adapted peoples we've become accustomed to. It seems like they've just settled into the barbarity of wasteland survival, but haven't existed long enough to organize. As we're making our way through the ruins, we happen upon a laser detonator, which is really just a souped-up laser pistol. It gently deconstructs the environment. Throughout, we're having more and more conversations with Ulysses, of Hopeville, and Ashton, the decaying bones of the twin cities we're making our way through, and the inadvertent role we played in their ruin.
Never would have known the divide had it not been for you.
I'm not sure what he's talking about, but I get the feeling he's gonna tell me. Eventually, Edie is within range of remote control, and is taken from us. It houses the codes needed all this time, and we've been bamboozled. One tumultuous engagement after another, and we find ourselves finally face to face with the rhetorician himself. But before we put an end to it all, we must first understand what it is we mean to end. Lonesome Road ties up all the loose ends of the story at large. Ulysses was a longtime scout for Caesar's Legion, who refused to deliver the platinum chip, the same one that fell into our hands, and caused our confrontation with Benny. To find out why he turned down the job, we need to scour the depths of the divide, a hellscape torn apart by frequent earthquakes and violent storms. The few who have braved it since the cataclysm have never returned. So what happened here? Well, before the divide was divided, it was once a fledgling community, in which we were among the few running deliveries to. The community flourished due to all the old world tech and supplies from military bases and silos and growing towns in the area. But despite access to these instruments, they remained separate from the outdated ideals of the NCR or the Legion. During his scouting duties, Ulysses happened upon this community, quickly realizing that it had the potential to become a real homeland for him, out of reach of the lies and corruption of everything else from whence he came. An oasis in a wasteland of death, unmolested by the prevailing powers of the Mojave. Ironically, this prosperous community became the center of attention to the two great warring powers, due to its potential as a supply line. It found itself annexed by the NCR, prompting a reaction by the Legion to send its own army to take it from them. Ulysses had tentative plans to liberate the community from both sides, but didn't respond quickly enough. In the meantime, we, as couriers for hire, deliver a seemingly innocuous iBot on behalf of the NCR. When activated, it sends a signal to the dormant nuclear missiles beneath the ground. The explosions caused massive earthquakes. The earth was torn asunder, unleashing new abominations from below as radiation rained down on the ruins, ghoulifying any remaining survivors. Originally intended to fight each other, the remnants of the Legion and NCR soldiers are now forever united in despair. So what does this mean to Ulysses? To answer that question, we need to regale the tale of the courier who's been exposed to as many cultures as us, a luxury not afforded to many in the Mojave. As we already know, he acted as a scout for the Legion, but this doesn't mean he respected it. Instead, he considered it a lesser of two evils. He believes it to be far better than the NCR at maintaining an empire, but only due to the capabilities of one man, Caesar. If he perishes, they'll regress and fall back into the warring tribes of their history. The same fate he believes to which the NCR will succumb, who's in constant inner turmoil with itself, pulling itself in different directions, thus getting nowhere. Too preoccupied with carving up the land without the manpower to keep it, and too proudly proclaiming how civilization should be rather than acknowledging the floundering of the present-day Mojave. So then what about an independent Vegas? And us, considering are we not capable of reform for the people? Unfortunately, no, as Mr. House tarnished any chance for redemption when he isolated New Vegas from the world, watching from a distance as the rest of the world burned. Unfitting behavior that shouldn't exist if we're striving for a better society.
Vegas is old world, filled with old world ghosts.
So, as it stands, from Ulysses' perspective, the NCR, Legion, and Independence are relics of the past, and must be deconstructed and buried before the road to the new world is paved. Welcome back. Much shittier place than the cozy sink of the big mountain, am I right? I wonder if I'll ever see him again. If you're enjoying the video, drop a comment, a like, and click the bell. It's free, and it really helps. Join the Reddit and Discord, and check out the Patreon to support me directly. Any contribution helps. Don't forget to check the community tab.
What happened here? Can happen again.
Hopeville and Ashton were seemingly making it just fine for a time. Ulysses would take it all in, as he was enraptured by it, until we come along with no knowledge of what we bear. To us, it was just another job. To Ulysses, it was everything he sought, and wanted to save it from being destroyed, but as we know, to no avail. Upon surviving the detonation with aid from the medic bots released from the reactivated silos, he awakens in the ruins of Hopeville, the proper rebirth in the home he's always wanted. He tracks the weather patterns over the deceased divide, leading him to Big Mountain. His journey here further shapes his outlooks and philosophies. He learns that the divide was subject to weather testing, which means that the weather damage caused could be fixed. He also has a paradigm shift in conversation with the think tank, realizing that not knowing your own history prevents all hope for a prosperous future. If you don't know your own history, you don't know who you are or what you've done, and you certainly can't tell what you should do. Because without history, there's no boundaries. Without boundaries, there's no ethics. Without ethics, there's chaos. Furthermore, for any such grand experiment, you must first clean the slate. Luckily, the think tank informs him that the spirit of America is still alive and well, buried deep in the divide. He means nukes. There's more nukes underground. And Ulysses now thinks that these nukes will allow him to reshape the future.
Chance for a new mission, new beginning, new way of thinking.
Ulysses' life is intrinsically linked to ours. The accidental destruction of the divide is the spark that lights his fire, and the similarities between us are the fuel. He hates us with a special fervor and watched our movements and whereabouts carefully until he was ready to achieve his goal. He couldn't get over what we indirectly and accidentally did to him. After learning everything he needs from Big Mountain, he decides to launch his nuclear attack on the Mojave. Armed with old-fashioned nuclear weapons, he has acquired enough leftover missiles to destroy the place we've come to know as home, and to reshape the world. It's almost poetic. We've taken everything from him, so he intends to do the same to us. The culmination of all his experiences taught him that one man, either by accident or design, can make or break a nation. But first, he needs us to activate the other Eevee that they couldn't fix themselves. A fitting irony, that were to yet again deliver the tools to end the world, handing over the keys to starting anew. Disillusionment is a feeling of disappointment arising from the realization that something is not what was expected or believed to be, possibly accompanied by philosophical angst from having one's beliefs challenged, akin to depression, as is the case with Ulysses. A journey similar to that of Follow's Chalk, whom has a pathway to set out alone after his exposure to the open world alters his perspective on everything he once knew. So, Ulysses, as well, suffers from seeing too much, his obligations and experiences exposing him to the worst of us. Once a member of a powerful Arizonian tribe where he became a great warrior and scout, until it was conquered and assimilated by Caesar. He was spared and his skills were applied to the Legion. During Caesar's feud with Joshua Graham, Ulysses was sent to train a warring tribe, allowing their success in destroying the city of New Canaan. His influence resulted in more bloodshed for a cause in which he didn't believe. They began to model themselves after him, to which he took great offense, considering his previous tribe was massacred by the Legion and this new one seeks to join it, single-handedly responsible for bastardizing the history of his tribe.
It was like looking at the dead of my tribe, reborn as ghosts, hateful, hungry, bowing to Caesar. Another history, gone.
Later, he discovered Hoover Dam and the rising republic of the NCR, and watched as Caesar became obsessed, corrupted even, with its old world potential. Their conflict leads to the discovery of Hopeville and Ashton, whose destruction pushes him to Big Mountain, where he meets Elijah, a capable, intellectual mind of such wasted potential. Ulysses pointed him to the direction of the Sierra Madre, anticipating his death. He continues conversations with the think tank, and the rest we know, as it has come full circle. Let's just imagine being Ulysses for a second. Everywhere he turned to belong, to survive, or to seek answers, only further repelled him from the common values of the survivors of the Mojave. He's an outsider, wanting nothing to do with the national conflicts and vices of the powers that be, clamoring to restore the old world that destroyed itself. Thus, we have a man who's lost everything with the destruction of the beacon of hope that could be different, except it too couldn't detect the dangers of the old world neighbors that wanted it all. This makes Ulysses incredibly sympathetic. But his case isn't unique. It speaks to the struggle of those who have nothing left. If we can empathize for a moment, it's easier to understand how we get someone willing to sacrifice everything and everyone for a cause they consider justified. It just goes to show that it's never so simple as to brand someone a terrorist or an evil person. Monikers so easily attached to those committing such heinous and destructive acts. These words mean nothing. They are reductive to reality and only serve to obfuscate the true issues. And refusing to acknowledging the factors, the history, the causes that contribute to this disillusionment is to warrant the effect.
Pieces of the old world like that just need someone careless enough to take them where they need to go, to do their killing.
It requires empathy on both sides to understanding the root cause, and sympathy for the desire to change it for the better. Of course, those are ideals of a utopia that we can only strive for, and right now, Ulysses isn't convinced, and we can in good conscience blame him. Now we understand why he turned down the platinum chip. He doesn't believe in the cause. He wants nothing more to do with any of it. As soon as new communities like Hopeville and Ashton begin to rise and flourish, they come under the watchful gaze of their neighbors. Fates sealed after their exposure to that of the NCR and Legion, engulfing them in atomic fire. More victims of the old world plague. Some of those ideals still held by factions today. So in order for the new world to rise, the old world and its ideals that have been clinging to life through the various factions must finally be destroyed. The recurring theme we're intimately familiar with once more becomes relevant. To begin again, we must first let go.
You were the only one willing to make the journey. It means everything, even if you deny it.
To be clear, I'm not condoning his actions or his point of view, but I am suggesting that a potential path to a peaceful resolution can only be met by unassuming understanding. Merely knowing more about Ulysses' experience suddenly adds more sense to this perspective. And maybe we too can see ourselves in him, because I find it hard to confidently say that had I lost everything in a similar fashion, might I even be on his side. Lonesome Road is divisive to me, split down the middle in nearly every aspect from the story to the gameplay, meaning that every engagement, every entanglement, every bit of dialogue or conflict had equal positives and negatives. I loved Ulysses' philosophies, but I hated listening to him drone on about it, and his constant speaking in metaphors were bleeding my ears. I loved the location, but it's restrained by linearity, invoking the worst of the Sierra Madre. I loved the history and the lore, but it's buried under the rubble, unlike Old World Blues with an environment chock full of ongoing experiments. The one standout that I couldn't find an opposite to would be the tone. I found it perfect, and I wanted more of it. The violent winds and the desolation. If I didn't know any better, this is what I would expect at the mention of an apocalypse. One can truly feel the hopelessness it's meant to convey. So when we hear the history of the bustling new towns, whose names carry heavy burdens, it truly strikes sadness in us, despite our absence of the nuclear disaster, absent for the end. Except, if Ulysses succeeds, maybe we can be present for the next. Standing across the resolute figure shaped of the past, we must now decide where we stand. But we can now empathize, and perhaps we should, as he's soon to decide the future. But despite the climax, we've yet to reach the finale. The conclusion of our journey through the Mojave is still to come. For Ulysses and the Lonesome Road, and their impacts on New Vegas, for us,
Old death in your hand.
it's the beginning of the end.